Good evening. I'm Heather Cordy. I'm Superintendent of the Sherwood School District, and on behalf of our Board of Directors and our administrators, welcome and thank you so much for being here with us this evening. Tonight, we're excited to share with you the hard work that teams all across the district have been involved in all summer. And before I go any further, I do want to thank staff and members of the core planning teams who have dedicated so many hours and their energy to creating models and adjusting models based on changing guidance, and always thinking first about our students and their well-being. A couple of technical next steps prior to talking about this evening. Tomorrow evening on Wednesday, August 12th, we will meet with our Board of Directors to further discuss the instructional models. That work session will be live streamed and will take place from 4 to 6:30 p.m. with the regular board meeting live streamed at 7 p.m. Additionally, our comprehensive distance learning blueprint is due to the Oregon Department of Education by August 17th. And all districts in Oregon have been working closely with the ODE all summer long. And we know that they expect that adjustments will be made to the model up until the first day of school and perhaps beyond, depending on the feedback and our ability to monitor and adjust. And I share that with you just really to emphasize the importance of your feedback and how important it is and how much it is appreciated. So recently, the governor released the metrics that will guide when districts will be able to conduct in-person learning. And we shared with you that we will be in the CDL model for the first 9 weeks, noting that if the COVID case numbers decrease and the metrics are attained, that we will adjust accordingly. So to that end, our focus this evening is to share with you 3 instructional models. Comprehensive distance learning, or CDL, which is how we will be starting the school year until the metrics are met. The hybrid model, which will eventually allow in-person instruction. And a third model that will be available that is fully online with Sherwood School District staff, curriculum, and students. And you will hear about all of those models and their interconnectedness during this evening's presentation. For the first half of the forum, you will hear from Assistant Superintendent Gary Bennett and Principal Marianne Fenderhide as they discuss guidance and the elements of the models. And as an aside, our team has been doing a lot of work preparing our buildings for in-person instruction for when that time comes. Sanitation protocols, ventilation, protective shields, and the list goes on. Those things are not being addressed this evening. We will be focusing on those facilities related elements when we meet with the board later in the month. So back to the forum. The second half this evening will be a moderated Q&A, and you will see early on in the slide deck how you can submit your questions electronically. Our moderator will be extracting those questions and asking them of our panel later in the evening. We likely will not have time to address all of the questions posed tonight, and we do intend to follow up with additional information in the days and weeks to come. Additionally, we'll be sending out a feedback survey tomorrow on Wednesday, where we ask for your input on the models presented tonight. Last, but certainly not least, before the presentation begins, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and truly honor how difficult last spring was. We know the distance learning model used in the spring wasn't perfect, despite a ton of hard work, innovation, and responsiveness on the part of all of our staff. There were so many challenges and unexpected curveballs. Everyone worked to support our students. We all of us, students, staff, and families, were thrown into an impossible situation with very little time to respond. Parents were basically asked to assume the role of student teachers, and staff were asked to teach in ways we've never had to before. Tonight, you'll hear principals talking specifically about lessons learned from the spring and how our CDL model will look different this fall. In closing, we are thankful for your partnership always. and especially during these unprecedented times. I thank you for your grace, your patience, and your kindness as we work hard to do the very best for our students. Mr. Bennett will now begin the formal presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Cordy. My name is Gary Bennett. I am the Assistant Superintendent in the Sherwood School District. Tonight, I will provide a district level overview of some things happening at the state level and at the district level, and that'll be followed, as you heard, by Mrs. Funderheid's presentation about the middle level models. So the Oregon Department of Education, the Oregon Health Authority, and the governor have released lots of guidance about what it looks like to open schools in person, and also guidance for comprehensive distance learning. This guidance has been coming out over the course of the entire summer. In fact, a big chunk of new guidance came out today detailing lots of details around special education and other things around limited options for in-person learning. We'll hear about all of that guidance today, except for the guidance released today is not included in this presentation because we just got it this afternoon. After that, you'll also have an opportunity to learn about some details about the middle school's proposed models and our thinking to date for both in-person learning and hybrid models, via a hybrid model and comprehensive distant learning. Most important, as Dr. Cordy said, an opportunity for you to provide some feedback to us through a survey that will come out later, and also an opportunity to ask questions during the presentation that we'll answer. The bit.ly at the bottom of the screen is the way in which you'll ask those questions, and that will appear on several slides throughout the presentation. You'll have multiple chances to see it. Next, please. On July 28th, the governor put out an executive order that released metrics for whether or not schools could open in the fall for in-person instruction. Two sets of metrics have to be met, one at the county level and one at the state level. Case rates at the county level have to be less than 10 cases per 100,000 in the population, and less than 5% of the people tested need to test positive in the preceding 7 days. Both of those need to be met for 3 weeks in a row. On top of that, across the state, less than 5% of the people who are tested for COVID-19 test positive. If both of those are met, Sherwood schools or any schools who meet that could open. As of now, Washington County does not meet those metrics, nor does the state. And so schools will open in comprehensive distance learning. Just to put these numbers in a little bit of context, for the week ending August 10th, Washington County had 43 cases per 100,000 people and a 5.6% positivity rate. That's slightly improved from the previous week when there were 54 cases and a 5.9% positivity rate. Next, please. Realizing that certain student groups are less able to learn remotely, the governor made some exceptions to the order and set the bar a little bit lower for certain groups to return to campus. One group for which she made an exception was students in grades K-3. You might recall that for all students to be able to return to campus, we need to be at less than 10 cases per 100,000 over the course of 7 days. For students in grades K-3, we need to be at less than 30 cases per 100,000, a significantly easier metric to obtain. Part of the reason that she made this exception to the order is that younger students seem to get the virus at lower rates, get less sick when they do get COVID-19, and they seem to spread the virus less often than adults or older children. On top of that, younger children also need access to in-person instruction to build literacy and important numeracy skills critical to their learning going forward. Or applicable to the middle school model, the governor also made exceptions for students who require extra support, students experiencing disabilities, and students in certain CTE courses. They allow for limited in-person instruction for those specific groups. Sherwood has not made any definitive plans around which groups might return to school when these metrics are met. Next. As we focused on preparing for the fall, Dr. Cordy referred to us looking at 3 models, all of which are closely related, and 2 of which are closely related, the hybrid model, or more closely related, the hybrid model and the comprehensive distance learning model. The hybrid model has been our focus for in-person instruction. In order to meet safety guides, we have to make significant changes to the instructional day and the way schools operate in order to meet social distancing guidelines. Principals will share more specifics of what that looks like later in the presentation. Our comprehensive distance learning model works in concert with the hybrid model at the middle level and each level, and it's an interim model that will be used until schools are allowed to offer in-person instruction. Both models are designed for smooth transition between one and another. So the comprehensive distance learning model will start in, will allow for a smooth transition into a hybrid, and should case rates worsen after school is open and we're forced to go back to comprehensive distance learning, it's built for that move and to keep that as seamless as possible for students. On top of the hybrid and comprehensive distance learning model, Sherwood is excited to offer the Sherwood Cloud Campus. This is an all online model where students learn from home for families who choose to do so, even when school is open for in-person instruction. This slide serves to compare the three models. In the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about each of the three models. One important note, though, is that under all instructional models, students will have the opportunity to learn the same content, whether they're in the comprehensive distance learning, hybrid, or Sherwood Cloud Campus. And they will stay connected to Sherwood students, Sherwood teachers, and their neighborhood schools. Next, please. Sherwood Cloud Campus, as I said, is Sherwood's fully online year-long model for those who choose it. It's aligned with the comprehensive distance learning and hybrid model, so students will be learning the same content. Students will remain Sherwood School District students. They can participate in clubs and athletics. We will ask families to register for this option soon to allow for proper planning and staffing. It's also worth noting that families choosing this option will be able to switch back to the hybrid model at the end of grading periods during the school year, provided there's capacity in our schools to meet social distancing guidelines. So it is an option for students, but they're not committed for the entire year. They should have an option to switch back and forth between the different models if they choose to at a later time. Next, please. We heard a lot of feedback from all of you in our spring survey that we sent out, and the Oregon Department of Education obviously heard the same feedback because they listed several changes, important changes to guidance for distance learning in the state of Oregon. Some of those are listed on the screen, and they're things that you told us as well. Live instruction on a daily basis, peer interactions on a daily basis, more consistent and timely feedback, attention to students' mental health, a more structured schedule. Some students really structured with the lack of structure in the schedule, and overall just more rigor and more instructional time. And you'll see all of those things in the guidance that ODE set out for us and that we've put place in our model. And although our teachers and our teams worked incredibly hard to develop our distance learning for all model in the spring of 2020, they did so in a very short timeline and under very challenging circumstances. With the benefit of having a summer to plan, the opportunity to learn from last spring, and adequate time to train teachers, we believe we'll have a much stronger model, and we're really excited about it this fall. On that, I'll turn it over to Marianne Funderhyde, principal of Sherwood Middle School, to talk about the model at the middle level.
Good evening. This is Marianne Funderhyde, the principal at Sherwood Middle School Archers. I also want to introduce my associate principals, Mr. Jake Healy and Miss Millie Wilkinson, who will be joining us during the Q&A time. Thank you for taking time to come and hear more about what we're planning as we prepare for the upcoming school year. So the middle level has been focused on our vision and values throughout the last year as a part of our work around school culture. In the spring of 2020, a vision statement was created through the collaborative efforts of all LRMS and SMS staff. When we wrote the vision statement, Archers are a kind and inclusive. Our community is a safe place to create, explore, and grow. Our original purpose had been to unify two schools, groups, and cultures. Now the statement holds even more meaning as it continues to guide our work in these unprecedented times. Next. In addition to our vision statement, several other principles were priorities in the planning of our models. Equity was at the forefront of our minds as we reimagined distance learning. We set out to design a culturally relevant model that supports and highlights the strengths of all students, providing an education that is joyful, student-centered, and authentic, and fosters growth intellectually, emotionally, and physically was important to the team. In addition, we recognized the significance of connection for middle school students, and we focused on ways to build community connection and a sense of belonging into the school day. We prioritize fluidity between the models as we know consistency will be particularly important this year as as will communication and collaboration with families. Last, our plans are proactive and streamlined to ensure safety and facilitate the least amount of change if shifts are necessary as a result of COVID-19, so we can provide stability for students, families, and staff. Next. Distance learning certainly posed its fair share of challenges last spring, and we are proud of the resilience shown by our students and staff. Change is hard, and we learned quite a bit from our experience in the spring and are excited to implement positive changes this fall. We were reminded of the importance of student-to-student interaction, especially for our middle school students, and the value of real-time instruction where students can engage with their teacher and peers. In addition, the importance of strong instructional practices, regardless of the model, was highlighted. Finally, streamlining communication in our learning management system, Canvas, is crucial to allow students and families to utilize it successfully. With summer to prepare, we are now equipped and excited to implement our learning to provide a better experience for everyone. Next. It is worth noting that the only variable between the models of comprehensive distance learning, hybrid, and Sherwood Cloud Campus is whether we are on site and the amount of time spent engaged in teacher-facilitated learning each day. It is important to closely align between the hybrid and online learning model. This will allow us to easily and quickly pivot between hybrid and short-term distance learning to ensure smooth and seamless transitions as needed. When we look at the results and feedback from families and ODE guidelines, it is clear and important that students receive live, real-time instruction daily. There are a variety of ways we will accomplish this. The use of full group Zoom meetings, discussions in Canvas, small group Zoom breakouts, or individual office hours for students with their teacher. The online instruction will be staffed by Sherwood Middle School teachers and instructional assistants. This is important so that we can ensure a sense of community for students, staff, and families, as stated in our guiding principles and values. We will continue to use Sherwood adopted curriculum, so there is consistency if we transition back to school in a hybrid model this year, and for students who move from online learning into hybrid. We know the value of our rich elective programs and how they connect to the social emotional learning of our students. To that end, we are working to offer electives as similarly as possible to past years, while shifting electives that were previously offered every other day to alternating quarters. We will look more closely at a student schedule later in this presentation. Again, it is worth noting that the only variable between the two models is whether we are on site and the amount of time spent engaged in teacher-facilitated learning each day. In order to support the needs of all of our students, we will continue to provide advanced learning opportunities, as well as supports for our students with an IEP, 504, or English language learners. Intervention support specific to reading, writing, and math will continue, and we recognize the need to replicate on-site interventions in this model. Grading will return to a letter system, A through F, to more accurately represent student progress, and will place emphasis on providing multiple opportunities and ways to demonstrate understanding and knowledge. Next. The social emotional learning support for our students is front and center in our minds and in our planning. The importance of social emotional learning to support mental health is also consistent in survey feedback and ODE guidance. With that being said, students can expect SEL to be embedded in their daily schedule. This will be through daily advisory or homeroom classes. We are currently looking at another curriculum, which we believe will better meet the needs of our students. It is also important that we leverage technology to provide opportunities for student collaboration and for giving them opportunities to make connections with their peers. We know how important social interaction is for our middle school students. This need was reflected in the survey feedback, guidance, supports the social emotional learning, collaboration, and creating a sense of community. This will be consistent for all students. The publisher of our adopted reading and writing curriculum has released additional virtual supports for students and teachers. The district has purchased this resource, and we are excited to utilize it in distance learning to enhance the learning experience for students. Teacher collaboration and common planning time is essential to provide students with equal opportunities and access to learning. We are implementing common prep time to support that collaboration. This will help in supporting teachers in delivering high quality instruction, for supporting teachers' social emotional needs, and is beneficial for new hires and ensures alignment between teachers to better support our students. Attendance and distance learning can take many forms. We will be partnering with families to ensure that they have the tools and the support that they need to engage and access distance learning. Next. In order to ensure the safety of our staff and students when we do return to a hybrid model, in-person instruction, we are carefully taking into account the guidance from Oregon Department of Education regarding how this instruction will look. The middle level administrative team is in the process of reviewing our building's capacity and making needed classroom changes to accommodate social distancing rules throughout all locations in the building. Additionally, we are investing a great deal of time into the creation of small grade level cohorts within our schools. The teaming model that we are implementing this year in a traditional way will allow us to keep stable cohorts of students while in the building. We have 2 cohorts in each of our grade levels, the bows and the arrows, in reference to our logo. We will strive to limit or eliminate activities that will require larger cohorts to mix with one another, and will create schedules for shared spaces that will allow for minimal cohort mixing and appropriate cleaning and disinfecting in between groups. Our team is also adding extra safety measures when it comes to hand washing and have purchased additional hand sanitizing stations, as well as creating rotations for class cohorts to use bathrooms for hand washing throughout the day. We are looking at how we can host classes in classrooms that currently have sinks in them. This will be important as it comes to frequent hand washing and social distancing among classroom cohorts. There are also some other safety measures that we plan to implement at the middle level in order to best support our alignment with Oregon Department of Education's guidelines around adults on school campuses. One such item will be the limiting of volunteers and adults within our building. While we know that our parents and volunteers are an integral part of our school communities, the risks associated with having additional adults in the building are high, and we are going to do our best to limit these risks as much as possible. We will work with our teachers and our school parent support organization to ensure that we find creative ways for our parents to stay involved in the school setting throughout the year. But please know this will look different and will not likely include on-site volunteering. Next. All students present for the hybrid in-person instruction will be expected to wear masks per the governor's most recent guidance, and all staff within the building will also wear masks and or face shields when interacting with student cohort groups and each other. Where appropriate in the offices, for example, we will also have more stationary barriers to protect staff and families. Our custodial team will have a detailed cleaning rotation that will prioritize the frequent cleaning of all high-touch surfaces. This will include, but is not limited to, our equipment, bathrooms, door handles, student desks and chairs, and handrails. Finally, we are working closely with our school nurse team to create detailed protocols for the isolation of sick or exposed staff and students. We will also provide a screening process as students arrive at school each day and participate in contact tracing logs to record interactions between staff and students throughout the day. Knowing that outdoor activities are safer than indoor activities, we'll also do our best to maximize the opportunities to have students outside whenever possible. Next. When planning for our hybrid model, when the metrics are attained, we need to be able to smoothly move between hybrid and distance learning models with minimal disruption to learning necessitates a schedule that is consistent between comprehensive distance learning, hybrid, as well as Cloud Campus. Again, the only variable between the 2 models is whether we are on site and the amount of time engaged in teacher facilitated learning each day. Research and survey feedback has demonstrated that live real-time instruction and learning can be a powerful method of remote instruction and lesson delivery. As such, we will work to incorporate consistent live instruction learning opportunities for students on a daily basis. Collaboration and systems of support will define our ability to be successful in the hybrid and online models. Each day will include designated office hours and preparation for teachers to connect with students in need of additional support. The model we are currently working on includes each grade level being split into 2 teams of cohorts. As I mentioned before, one cohort will be the arrows, the other cohort will be the bows to connect students to our Archers logo. Each cohort will rotate into and out of building every week. For example, the arrows cohort would be on site 1 week and then in comprehensive distance learning the following week, while cohort bows would move from comprehensive distance learning to on-site. Students will remain within their same peer group as much as possible throughout each day to promote the collaboration and connections, which we know is extremely important to our middle school students, and again, falls into one of our many values. Students engaging in learning remotely will participate in live lessons with the students who are in the building. It is important to note that all the lessons and standards being taught are the same, whether in person or online. At the middle level, we were already implementing a teaming model, and we believe we have the ability to bring students on site when it is safe within that model by creating these cohorts. Now more than ever, we need to work together as a community and include purposeful times for building relationships and fostering connections between students. It is for that reason that we will consistently include social emotional learning and community building activities within our instructional delivery. We are all partners in this together. Again, similar to the comprehensive distance learning, we know the value of our rich elective programs and how they connect to the social emotional learning of students. So we will continue to work on how we will offer those electives similarly to past years. As in the comprehensive distance learning model, the hybrid model will also have a grading system of letter A through F, focused on multiple opportunities for students to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding. Next. This is a sample of a student schedule in the hybrid model. Core classes are offered daily and are blocked, while PE classes are opposite an elective or potentially interventions. In this example, a student is enrolled in Spanish, art, and study hall, in addition to their PE/health class. Next. This is a sample schedule for a student participating in AVID, which we are thrilled to be offering in grades 6 through 8 this year. You will see that AVID is a year-long elective in this schedule, while outdoor living is a 2-quarter elective, meaning our 2-quarter electives are offered quarters 1 and 3 or 2 and 4 to ensure that students are exposed to the content throughout the school year in order to support retention and mastery of material. This would also be a very similar schedule to a student that is in band. Next. As we all know, education requires partnerships with families and community. So it will be important for our school to reach out to families and community stakeholders to ensure multiple perspectives and voices are represented as plans are developed. We will continue to work in close concert with staff and the school board to promote collaborative efforts to support implementation of best practices and foster successful outcomes. The comprehensive distance learning team, comprised of educators, will work to build a robust online instruction model that works in tandem with a hybrid model so that when community health metrics are met, we can move smoothly between the two models. Survey responses and data will be incorporated in all stages of design and planning and will continue to inform decision making going forward. This includes surveys to staff, families, and students. We will continue to work to identify how best to support our students, including historically underserved groups, in both the hybrid and comprehensive distance learning models. We will continue to integrate plans to include SPED guidance and general education guidance as it is updated. As a district, we value equity, and we will continue to use our equity lens when making decisions. We will also provide time for teachers to collaborate and to reach out to families in order to fulfill a promise of quality education that reaches and teaches all students. We look forward to your feedback on our plans through the survey link, as well as the district feedback email. And we are excited to continue partnering with you in the implementation of a successful educational program for our students. Thank you. At this time, I'm now going to hand it over to Mr. Jim Rose for the Q&A portion of this evening.
Thank you, Principal Thunderhead. We have about a half hour for questions, and I'm going to start off with this one. Is there a plan to support students in a transitional period? Example, incoming 6th graders or outgoing 8th graders for the important milestones. Though it might seem trivial, these special moments are so important to student mental health.
So yes, we are in the, that connects with our social emotional learning. We have also, when it is safe to do so, have a hope to have cohorts be able to come and potentially see the building itself in smaller groups to identify where classes may be if they were in a hybrid model. And also we have a staff member specifically working this summer around the social emotional needs of all of our students because it will be a transition for all 3 grade levels.
I would add on to that for our distance learning, we know that for our incoming 6th graders, for example, the learning management system will be different. It will be Canvas instead of Google Classroom. And so part of our plan is to carve out some time to train students on that as well as families and make sure it's really clear how to go about using that and how to engage with teachers in that platform.
Thank you. Will students have opportunities to interact with their teachers during online live instruction sessions?
Yes, we have built-in live instruction and real-time interactions embedded throughout our plan in a lot of different ways. We're planning on using Zoom to have some live interaction and a class model. But in addition to that, teachers will be having office hours where students can interact with them and interact with each other in Zoom conference calls and breakout groups, because we know it is so important for that interaction between student and teacher, but just as important for that peer-to-peer interaction for that social, emotional, mental health piece as well. So that is very important in our plan.
What will the protocol be or accommodations made for students who cannot access live sessions or stream videos due to lack of internet and in locations where hotspots do not work well?
I can start and Brady can jump in. One of the things that we've talked about in our distance learning team is that need to balance the live instruction for the kids that are able to attend that time with also being flexible for students who can't attend at that time or families who aren't available to support their students at that time or need them to be doing other things. And so one of the ideas we've talked about is having an opportunity for that live instruction and that FaceTime with teachers and their classmates. But in addition to that, having it available for students who aren't able to attend by possibly having something like a recording of the session for students to access after class. I'll let Brady answer the hotspot question.
Yeah, in the ODE guidance just released today, the update this afternoon, there was additional guidance on different ways that we could potentially make resources available to families who live in areas where there is no high-speed internet access and there's no cell phone access, so our hotspots are ineffective. And so, you know, we are partnering with businesses from around the state. We participated in a conference call just before this meeting where we're really trying to find as many solutions as possible. And with that new guidance from ODE, we may have some more availability about how we can make our resources available to families without reliable internet access.
Here's a question that my 8th grader keeps bugging me about. When will students get their class schedules?
We're currently working on building out our sections and our class schedules. We're hoping to get that soon. We don't have a specific day yet set, but we're finalizing our teaming model and our sections this week, hopefully, which would allow us to start placing students into classes sometime next week, and then continuing to build that out, running our model until we can get the it kind of balanced as we need, so that we should have it all ready to go before the start of school for sure.
If we choose the CDL model, can we continue with it even if and when guidelines are satisfied and the hybrid model becomes feasible?
I think this question is asking if we start in Cloud Campus, can we stay in Cloud Campus all year, even once we move into the hybrid model? And the answer to that is yes. The Cloud Campus is available to students all year long as an exclusively distance learning means for instruction. And if you change your mind and you want to go back into hybrid, as Gary mentioned, you have that option at the end of every term.
Thank you. Does the full distance learning model have live lessons? And does it allow for students to interact with other students?
Yeah, I can jump in and address this one as well. It absolutely does. The state requires us to have a certain amount of live opportunities. And we just know what's best for our students is to give them live opportunities to access their teachers, whether that's through direct instruction in a group, whether that's through conferences in small groups, and to address the options for peer-to-peer interactions. That's a key focus of our planning this summer. It was a key emphasis of the guidance from ODE this summer. And we just know from our staff and student and family feedback that we really need to have a special emphasis on building back that community digitally in the ways that we can. And we're investing in a suite of strategies and tools that allow students to get together, whether it's in breakout rooms on a Zoom call or whether it's collaborating on a project digitally via other tools.
Does the ODE or Sherwood plan allow for any student who is unable to learn remotely due to a disability to receive in-person learning prior to meeting the metrics set by the governor?
That guidance changed today and came out, and there's some new guidance that makes it easier for students to return to in-person instruction. I don't want to try to state what those are exactly because I read a lot of new guidance today, but it is a little bit easier bar to hit for certain students to return for limited instruction than the governor's metric of 30 cases per 100,000 people. Just to add to that, it appears that the state and ODE are working very hard to allow us to bring back to campus students who need to come to campus. And that we think that's good news.
Just a little bit to add to that. So ODE provided some guidance that suggested that we should first consider for students with disabilities how to provide special education services in the comprehensive distance learning environment, and then track progress and make sure that every student is able to access their education in that way. And if not, then the IEP team would meet and determine, the best course of action for each student.
Thank you. If a child chooses cloud model and then switches back to hybrid, will they have the same teacher or will they change classes and teachers?
Right now it's looking like they're going to keep the same teacher. And in addition to that, we've kept them in the same team. So the goal is to keep, like we mentioned, that model really fluid so that students get to know their classmates, get to know their teacher, and regardless of where we land with hybrid or if students are coming in and out of Cloud Campus, there is that level of consistency.
Will school run Monday through Friday during the CDL period, or will the school week again be shortened?
Currently, our plan would be to run on our regular Monday through Friday schedule, although there are always those holidays and some days off just as a result of the calendar.
With the current workshop model for ELA, how will students get the resources, the books, mentor texts, reading, writing journals they will need in order to grow their thinking skills and literacy?
That's a great question and one we don't have totally fleshed out, but we are committed to getting things in the hands of students that they need to engage in learning. And I know all of our ELA teachers, if they're watching this, are just back cheering for that. But we had a system in the spring that we used to deliver books to students, kind of a pickup situation. And we are committed to running something similar to that or another process to make sure we get all materials for ELA and other subjects in the hands of students so they can engage in that meaningful learning.
And just a follow up to that, we are in conversations with our transportation department. They are just key in the conversations that we're having every day around the planning, and we're exploring how we can take advantage of those opportunities with our bus fleet to assist with some deliveries.
This was addressed in the presentation, but for clarification, will a full load of courses be provided and expected during CDL? Or instead, will the educational load or goal be reduced to fewer courses?
So we are required to provide a certain number of hours of instruction. And so we are planning on having the same course load in the sense that it'll be the same number of classes, but what that looks like in a day might be different. We recognize that there's a need to provide synchronous instruction, meaning live real-time instruction where students can engage as we were talking about, but at the same time balancing that to provide a level of flexibility for families so that students can do that independent work at a time that might work really well for them. And so the answer to that is a little bit of yes and.
Why has Sherwood School District switched to a quarter system?
So part of why we switched to a quarter system is because the cohorting guidance that was on us from the ODE really restricts our ability to do our AB schedule that we'd previously done. So normally with our electives, our students would have flipped every other day between different classes. That's not really a possibility in able to keep our cohorts intact. So by switching to quarters, but having the quarters rotate a first and third and second and fourth, we can still do our electives and run our electives pretty much as we normally would. We just condense those ABs into quarters. And then that allows us to do some continuity so that if you're in Spanish, you get Spanish throughout the year instead of half a year of Spanish.
Follow up to that is that we are talking about moving to quarters for grades 6 through 12 for this year in order to address those issues that Mr. Healy just described, and continuing with trimesters at the elementary level. And that certainly is a conversation that we are having with our board of directors. So it ties into calendar and those other pieces.
I would also add to that we're discussing that for this year. That is not something we're currently talking about long-term. That is a proposal for the current school year. In this, or as long as we're in a situation where we're in a hybrid or distance learning model, hopefully no longer than the school year.
Building on that question, on the quarter system, what will each grade level elective wheel include? Will students be taking these electives during distance learning as well as during the hybrid learning? And finally, will these same electives be offered in the cloud campus?
Yeah, so to some extent, we're still identifying what electives we will be able to offer, but we are offering as many as we possibly can that would have been offered had we been in a normal school year, a normal school system. That especially includes our most popular electives where we have the numbers to support that. So when we think about things like that, that's often band, study hall is one of our most popular electives, engineering, FACS. We will be trying to offer as many as we can, but we don't have a definitive number right now.
And we'll be offering them in both models.
Thank you for that clarification. What should we expect for school supplies?
So that is something that we're identifying with our teams. Typically our teams, grade level teams with their team leaders identify what supplies they will need. And that's something that we will need to, we still are working on what that will look like and what students will need. We have also talked about potentially with some of the electives, putting some kits together that students can have access to at home to be able to engage in the elective itself.
Thank you. The band and choir programs have been strong in the Sherwood School District. How will we do bands and choirs this year?
So again, that's something we're still trying to flesh out, but we are committed to offering band and choir. We know that those are really important to the community. They're really strong programs. Our teachers do a great job. Our students do a great job of participating in that. They do some amazing things, and we want to make sure we provide as much opportunity to do that in a way that continues that tradition and would be sort of contiguous with, you know, previous years and going forward, so they don't miss a year for some reason in any of those offerings.
If I understand, we can elect cloud study, but change it if it becomes safe in our minds. What's the time frame for that change?
Currently talking about the end of each grading period being an opportunity for students to come back, provided that, and there should be sufficient capacity, but it would be providing there's physical capacity in the classes they would want to move into. The thing to think about with the comprehensive distance learning model is students will stay in the comprehensive distance learning model until case rates drop to 10 per 100,000 people. That's about an 80% drop in cases from where we are right now.
And when Mr. Bennett describes physical capacity in our classrooms and buildings, just as a reminder, that is when we're tending to the social distancing guidelines as directed by ODE and OHA. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about the physical capacity and or limitations.
Who is developing this online curriculum so that it will be engaging and succinct? Writing and adapting curriculum is a skill and a profession. Do we have a company we are working to do this with?
We are using our teachers who are skilled and educators and trained in curriculum instruction and instructional practices to implement the same robust and rigorous curriculum that you would see in an in-person classroom. This will allow, one, our philosophy and the curriculum that we went through an adoption process for and was approved by our school board. This will allow teachers to implement that in an online setting. But it also allows for that ability for students to come and go from in-person and on-site instruction to that online model seamlessly.
Thank you. Will students have different teachers if they choose Sherwood Cloud versus campus? Versus hybrid, excuse me. Cloud campus versus hybrid.
No, we will have Sherwood Middle School teachers providing the instruction for both the hybrid model and the cloud campus and distance learning.
What will communication to parents regarding grades look like?
So I think that's something we are still working on. As was said in the presentation, we're definitely shifting from what it looked like in the spring to more of a letter grade model. We'll continue to use Synergy and Canvas as platforms that communicate, as well as email. There would be a grading period, but when it comes to more in-depth specifics, that's something our teacher teams are still working on.
Speaking of Canvas, how will teachers make sure that they are using Canvas consistently?
We have a team of teachers meeting several times a week to help us align our instructional practices and our communication practices in Canvas. We have a list of agreements that we're starting with and using our teachers to help us develop those fully. And so, you know, by investing in the time to have our teachers have the conversation, we're really confident that we're going to be able to bring a lot of our practices and the way that it feels for our students and families and the places that they need to go into alignment.
And I would want to add on there that we're also building in some common planning time for our teachers so that they can align in collaborative learning teams, which is a system we already had in place. But they will have frequent planning time together so they can align and communicate together and use Canvas together in a way that would be streamlined and consistent.
When our county makes the required COVID statistics, how quickly can the schools get our children to transition from the CDL to the hybrid model?
We don't have an exact timeline in mind, but I would anticipate that there would be a period of time where teachers would need to, there would be cleaning protocols, there would be training for example, new safety drills and emergency procedures, training in all of the protocols related to health and safety and social distancing, cohort logging, all of those things. So there would be a period in time where we would need to train teachers and have teachers have time to prepare. I don't have an exact sense of how long that would take, but there would be some sort of transition required there.
In spring of 2020, there was a lack of live teaching or interaction with teachers and students. In middle school, how many hours per day will be allocated for live teaching and interaction? Will the detailed and structured schedule be available before the school year begins?
So one change from distance learning in the spring to our plan this fall is to have a schedule. We didn't really have a set schedule for students in the spring, and that created problems because we weren't really able to provide live instruction because it could have several lessons for a student happening simultaneously, and it would be difficult for them to attend them all. So one way we think we can circumvent that is with the schedule. But in terms of live instruction, there isn't a set number that we are going to provide. However, we know it's really important to provide that throughout the week and with all of the courses. And so that's going to be really important. 50% of the time during the week will be teacher facilitated. And so that could be a live face-to-face thing. That could be office hours. It just means that in some way the students are interacting with something planned by the teacher or with the teacher. And so there's going to be that teacher facilitated time that will be 50%. And so it will look a lot different than it did in the spring, and students will be supported to a much greater degree.
What tech platform will be used for peer-to-peer interactions and for support groups if needed?
The tools that we're investing in, besides Canvas is a tool that can be used to foster collaboration. The Google suite of tools is something that can be leveraged to foster collaboration. And we'll also be investing in Zoom, which is a live video meeting platform that we're using right now. And one of the great features about Zoom is the breakout room functionality. And it's a way for us to put students into small groups so that they can have those chats and they can easily transition in and out of the group meeting, just like they would in class when we're giving full group instruction and they're breaking up into partners and small groups to have conversations and work on pieces of instruction and then coming back to the whole group. So that's a list of different tools that we'll be able to leverage to foster collaboration.
Will parent and teacher conference days resume in the new school year?
So if somebody wants to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe the ODE guidance actually does mandate that there are some sort of conferences that will occur. We don't have details yet on what that will look like. And depending on when they occur and what the metrics are at that time, it could look very different.
Can you talk about how synchronous learning will look on a typical CDL day? What if students cannot log in? Will there be an option of watching the tape to the lesson later in the day?
Yeah, so the synchronous instruction can look a few different ways. I think we've mentioned some of the different ways that it could look. I think one important thing to know is that synchronous instruction doesn't mean that it's just a Zoom call with everybody in a class. It just means an interaction that's real time and live. And that they'll be using Zoom to interact if we're talking about a class interacting in that way.
In the hybrid model, how can you guarantee social distancing at all times?
Some of the things that we're looking at, the cohorting, the supervision of that, the transitions from class to class and being really strategic about staggering those, really the structure of the building, and then the way we would potentially do lunches, which I'll let Jake speak to here in just a minute. But really having some systems in place and some, like I said, some staggered dismissal and from class to class, as well as where students within that building, we have space and wings and pods like that we'll be able to manage that in terms of just the wings themselves.
Yeah, so just to add on, I think one of the bright spots is our move to a larger building. We really do have some space there that we can work with. We have areas where we will set up separate lunch spaces, and so we can keep people in their cohorts and really space people out as much as possible. We're talking about potentially staggering some start and stop times for classes, so you're not in the hallways all at the same time. Potentially having teachers move at some of those moments as well to try and reduce hallway congestion again. We're just going to try and set up as many things as possible. And some of that will come down to teacher training and student training as well. Right? So as we train out, what does it look like? What do we need to do? How do we keep people in a class separate? How do we keep them in the hall separate? We believe we can enforce that social distancing requirement.
How is the registration for electives going to be managed this year for both CDL and Cloud Campus?
So we haven't totally nailed down our schedule, but one thing that we're fairly certain we're going to be doing is with the schedule based on what we're creating for the hybrid model, that schedule will remain for the distance learning for those students. And so it'll be based on what Jake was alluding to, the student preference, as well as just our numbers and what we can support with the number of electives. And then our students in Cloud Campus will have those same options. So they will be in classes with our students that are in the hybrid CDL classes. So they'll all be interacting together in that way.
And just to add to that, we have in the last week been looking at the forecasting from last spring and really trying to identify where the demand is for the electives, because we believe that that can support the social emotional learning too as well within some of our electives and students that thrive in that. So we're re-looking at the forecasting from last spring to help determine potentially what those electives will be and how many sections we will have of them.
Thank you. During online hybrid learning, how many hours a day are students expected to be engaged on screens?
So again, I think that's something we're still working on, and it could look very differently depending upon the lessons that the teacher has set up and is facilitating. Just like in class, there are times where students are on screens quite a bit, potentially writing or doing research, and other times they're doing something that is more project-based or something that isn't, they're writing in a journal. So I don't think we have an answer that's exact on that. But we are aware that while screens and technology are a really important tool for collaboration, there's also times where there can be too much screen time, and that's true whether we're in the building or we're remote.
When will school start? What day?
We are currently talking about September 14th in order to allow some additional days the week prior to reach out to families, make those connections, and to be able to provide some time for professional development for our staff as well. We will be discussing that with our board tomorrow night in our board meeting when we take a look at the calendar.
We have time for one last question. When dividing up students in the bows and arrows, I assume that siblings will be together. Will parents also be able to choose one or two other families to request to be in their group for childcare and bubbling purposes?
We haven't worked the details out on that yet. That's something that is on our radar in terms of meeting the needs of families and also the needs of students. And so that's something that we'll need to get more detail and get in the weeds on, so to speak, as we move forward with our models. And again, forecasting from spring will make could potentially help guide some of that.
Thank you, Principal Funderhead. Thank you to the whole panel for your time this evening. We appreciate all the answers to these questions. Thank you to all the folks out there watching. That concludes our evening for now. We do have a high school presentation that will begin at 7:30, and we will continue to try to respond to questions in the coming days. Thank you very much and good night.